are few places on the North American continent where the geology is as dramatic, as imposing as here. These are the Colorado Rockies, the 14,000-foot roof of the nation. Through this great natural barrier, the Colorado River carved an escape route in its journey to the Grand Canyon and on to the Gulf of California. In time measured only on nature's calendar, the river probed the path of least resistance through this rock, among the oldest on the continent. Nothing like Glenwood Canyon happens overnight. First Americans discovered an unfriendly place. Winter chilled the bluffs. The canyon offered only limited shelter and food. Not even the howling wind could find its way into every craggy haven of Glenwood Canyon, a rocky gorge 2,000 feet deep. Much later, modern man reshaped the canyon as best or worst he could. A railroad was built along the south wall in 1887. Trains began to deliver goods and take away the silver and coal. In 1890, Henry Morrow built a perilous stage trail through the canyon. By the turn of the century, the wagon trail had been replaced by the first public road. In 1906, Barney Oldfield roared through the canyon on this road in a coast-to-coast record-setting automobile race. It was the railroad, though, which made possible construction of a hydroelectric power plant that began generating electricity in 1909 and still does today. By 1940, the old road had been replaced by U.S. Highway 6, and the narrow-gauge railroad tracks had become Denver and Rio Grande's main line. The railroad knew a good canyon when it saw one. In the 1940s, the Denver and Rio Grande added vista domes to give passengers an unrestricted view. But ultimately, more Americans would choose to travel by car than by rail. Dwight David Eisenhower fathered the interstate highway system. He envisioned high-speed thoroughfares crisscrossing America, connecting the 48 states. Building the interstate system was the largest public works project of the 20th century, and one of the crowning jewels of the entire system would be tucked away in Glenwood Canyon, the route selected for I-70. It was clear from the beginning, this final 12 miles of I-70 would be no ordinary road. Selection of the route tested politicians and lawyers, environmentalists and citizens, designers and builders. The Colorado River already shared Glenwood Canyon with a railroad, a highway, and a power plant. But they arrived at a time when need outweighed environmental concerns. Environmental impact was a phrase not invented in the early 1900s. But now it was the interstate highway that became the greatest challenge and threat to the canyon. The canyon was so narrow in places, a a modern four-lane roadway might not fit. And some critics claim that an interstate highway, even if it would fit, wouldn't be fitting.
Well, the basic problem was convincing the citizens that we could put a road here and really tread lightly on Mother Nature. Creating a four-lane highway with that size of platform in a canyon this narrow is something that people really didn't believe we could do. And that's where the impact of the environmental movement really came in, and that really is an example of how the environmental groups can positively impact the outcome of a project.
To conceive an extraordinary highway required extraordinary vision. Two architects, more accurately, inspired designers, provided that vision. Joseph Passon of Washington, D.C., and the late Edgardo Contini of Los Angeles.
It was not a matter of designing a highway, or it was not a matter of creating a recreational environment. It was the issue of resolving very real conflicting demands. The canyon is a very restricted and very delicate and very sensitive environment. The difficulty was how to reconcile the scale of the highway with the scale of the canyon itself.
Now those two were the leaders, but the CAC, the Citizens Advisory Committee, the engineers from the consulting, the design consultants, the Colorado Department of Highways engineers, all made up a design team, and for the next several years they were just designing inch by inch this canyon.
When I first was asked to be on there, my question was, what do I know about building a road? I think it would be interesting, but I don't think I know enough to be on that committee. But they said, well, they just wanted an ordinary person's opinion on different things. So I said, well, if that's, then I'll take it.
The Highway Department gave the Citizens Committee the consultants that were needed, and we really had a free rein in asking any of the questions that we wanted.
We had so many meetings. First it started not so often, then we went weekly, sometimes even more than that. And anything that we questioned, they explained everything, from every tree, from the rocks, everything. About all the environment and how it would look from the road. And they did everything they possibly could.
Highway builders had seen the unfortunate legacy left by the railroad and the first road, and they assured concerned citizens that mistakes made then would not be repeated. The Douglas fir and paintbrush would be left to live and die naturally. Plans called for saving the pinyon pine, the juniper, the aspen, and the mountain mahogany, which secure the rock slopes and decorate the seasons in this ancient place.
One of the best examples of this is up on the east end, where they have the French Creek Viaduct, where you have about a 80-foot tall Douglas fir on one side of the highway, and you have another 80-foot Douglas fir on the other side of the highway. That you can basically, if you're standing on the highway itself, you can reach over and touch, and it straddles right between the two trees. That's pretty amazing engineering, to be able to plan on that and then actually have it happen.
Glenwood Canyon shelters thousands of years of life and 1 billion years of geology. The history of the Earth can be seen in layers stacked a couple of thousand feet high. Colorado's state animal, the bighorn sheep, as well as deer and elk, birds and reptiles, also are part of this place, and they too became part of the master plan. highway's design would serve all three: the history, the geology, and the life. During construction, some cutting and blasting couldn't be avoided.
3, 2, 1.
But afterward, the freshly exposed rock would be sculpted with benches and knobs to resemble the surrounding geology.
We were standing on one of the cuts with the landscape architects, and they were saying, well, how do you want this cut to look? And I just simply pointed across the river and said, make it look like Mother Nature did it. Then we said, well, Mother Nature's been staining this rock for millions of years with the rainfall and the minerals in the water, so then we went back and literally painted the cut.
Clearly, this would not be an ordinary road. Contractors accustomed to somewhat unrestricted construction in the past faced new challenges and penalties in Glenwood Canyon. Destroy a raspberry bush and the fine was $30. Scrub oak was priced at $45. The blue spruce or cottonwood trees were valued at over $22,000.
You can see the pride with the contractors. They all have a feel of, responsible ownership, really what it is of the project. And they're doing their own videos, they're doing their own promotions based on the canyon because they're proud of it, proud of the work they've done, and rightfully so.
The bulldozers and graders became gentle giants. The huge cranes delicately lifted steel and concrete into place. The allure of Glenwood Canyon captured the workers who toiled in its depths. The task would take many years, and the workers would come to know the canyon well. Craggy and beautiful. Hostile and seductive. Defiant and delicate. To match the canyon's moods, the inspired designers fashioned highway segments both tall and graceful, a combination of terraced roadways, viaducts, and tunnels. The terracing required 15 miles of retaining walls. This minimized the excavation of the hillside and the amount of fill in the Colorado River. The terraced roadways aren't flush with the retaining walls. They extend an additional 6 feet. This allowed the eastbound and westbound lanes to be built even closer together in the narrow confines. But there's another benefit, too. The overhanging slab casts a shadow on the retaining wall. This tricks the eye. The wall appears to be much shorter, but many of the walls actually are as high as 40 feet. And then there are the bridges and viaducts, over 40 of them. Only a few are for such traditional purposes as river crossings. Most were designed to protect the environment. The elevated highway floats over the trees. To determine the most cost-effective way to build the longest bridges, contractors had an option. They could bid to build a structure either of concrete or of steel. 2 sets of plans had been prepared. As a result, both concrete and steel graced the canyon. Not only was construction tricky, but so was moving thousands of cars a day through the canyon. The Colorado Department of Transportation came up with the pilot car concept, leading traffic through a series of active construction projects with only one stop.
You're going to be here for about 30 minutes. This will be your only stop in the canyon. Flagger here in front's going to lay down his paddle and clear construction traffic around. If you just stay put until he tells you to go, I'd appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Pilot cars helped traffic move safely through the canyon and kept traffic out of the construction sites, giving contractors a chance to get more work done.
Leslie, your one-way's been shortened to the 27.
The flaggers did more than direct traffic. They answered questions and provided directions, even if drivers weren't quite sure where they were.
The best one I've ever had asked is when they started construction work on the Grand Canyon. Made me a little nervous. I was wondering what state they thought they were in.
To build this alpine highway and preserve the environment required ingenuity and special equipment, such as this crane imported from France, actually a traveling gantry, walking on spindly legs from pier to pier. The precast concrete sections, some weighing over 50 tons, were trucked to the site and lifted into place. The cantilever balance was accomplished by placing alternating segments until the gap between the piers was closed. Then the ballet began again from the next pier. It almost seemed as if the new bridge had been airlifted in, and in some ways it was.
We're going to build them outside and bring them in like Tinker Toys and put them in place because it's the only way it could be done.
This bridge was actually built 25 miles east of here in Eagle.
This unique French machine accelerated the construction of the French Creek Viaduct and the Hanging Lake Viaduct, while preserving the fragile landscape below. The French Creek Viaduct, two bridges in tandem with a combined length of 4,000 feet, made of 613 individual concrete segments. The Hanging Lake Viaduct, 1,200 individual segments, many of them spanning the Colorado River. Eastbound drivers travel a 1,300-foot bridge, while westbounders are taken 80 feet above the ground on a 1.5 mile long viaduct leading to the Hanging Lake tunnels. It was in this special spot where neither a terraced highway nor a viaduct would have been appropriate, where the highway must disappear altogether.
I think most people, I know Edgardo does, I think most people agree with him. The most interesting part of the canyon is at Hanging Lake, where you have a lake, you have this very steep wall. Now the way to get the road away from the river there is to put it in a tunnel. And that's Edgardo's solution to the people who worked on that part.
Hanging Lake, a natural wonder formed by a geologic fault, home to countless mountain wildflowers, birds, and waterfalls. The trail to the lake, about 1 mile long, rising 930 feet from the canyon floor, is one of the most popular hikes in the state. And now, visitors to the lake are completely unaware of the 4 lanes of traffic on the other side of the canyon. Here, in the middle of the canyon, designers and builders encountered their greatest challenge. Tunnels, by their very nature, are complex structures. And to complicate matters, the 4 portals of the Hanging Lake tunnels also had to serve as bridge abutments. The 4,000-foot tunnels started with this simple pilot bore, exploratory surgery yielding valuable information about groundwater, fault zones, and the geology. The pilot bore gave designers and potential contractors a clearer picture of the geology they would encounter. Eventually, the pilot bore was enlarged to become the eastbound tunnel. A drill and blast technique was selected to build these tunnels. The use of rock bolts ensures that the man-made cavern is self-supporting. Steel or concrete supports are unnecessary, even though some 250,000 cubic yards of rock was taken out of the mountain. But drivers don't see bolts or a rocky cave. Instead, they enter a brightly tiled room. Here in the center of Hanging Lake tunnels, hidden from view, technicians keep a watchful eye on Glenwood Canyon. The tunnel and the highway appear to be concrete and steel, but some parts are almost human. The highway can see and feel, and you may think it's talking to you. Television cameras provide the sight, electronic eyes to monitor traffic and trouble spots. Weather stations throughout the canyon give early warning as the climate changes. Sensors in the tunnel roadway alert crews to stalled vehicles and slowdowns. Heat detectors will know if there's a vehicle fire. And if there's an emergency in the tunnel, you'll hear instructions on your own car radio, no matter what station you're listening to.
It seems abundantly clear that we have in this Glenwood Canyon project the most advanced technology for tunnel control any place in America today. And that gives us a foresight on what we as citizens can look forward to on intelligent highways of the future. Beautiful testing ground to look at what modern electronics with modern sensors can do to enhance safety in the traffic environment, irrespective of the level of traffic we may be dealing with.
Safety was a paramount concern in the highway design, but so too was enjoyment. Planners knew that many people would choose to spend more leisurely time in the canyon. Visitors at the Grizzly Creek Rest Area or any of the other 3 rest areas in the canyon can relax and enjoy the beauty. More than 150,000 new shrubs and trees have been planted, helping restore the canyon and enhancing the recreational experience. Stop at any of the rest areas. You'll find picnic grounds, trails, even launch sites for rafting and kayaking. All of the areas offer access to the recreation path running the entire length of the canyon. The paths and all of the rest areas are accessible to the handicapped. The elevation of the highway often was determined by the needs of the recreation path. In places where the canyon is exceptionally narrow, the path is suspended from the retaining walls.
I think they've done a beautiful job. And I think it's going to be one of the neatest places in the United States.
The directive crafted by the 1968 Colorado legislature now seems prophetic. The lawmakers asked the designers and builders of the Canyon Highway to blend the wonders of human engineering with the wonders of nature. That's been accomplished.
I have really felt from my first trip through here that this was an inspirational story that ought to be told.
Well, this is a fantastic project, and it really brought out the best in the people that worked on it. They took pride in their work, and they really had a strong sense of accomplishment. It also really shifted some of the philosophies and cultures and ideas about building highways in this country. At $40 million a mile, it took a tremendous amount of this country's resources, but it was worth it because it ultimately treated the canyon right and gave the citizens what they wanted.
It probably would have been possible to just build the 4 lanes side by side right down in the bottom, fill into the river and cut out the vegetation and blast a lot more rock than we've had to blast. But the commitment to preserve the environment, to make it aesthetically pleasing, resulted in this type of construction.
And as far as I'm concerned, this is one of the, well, I call it the gemstone of the system. It's the one that had all of the controversy, had all of the conflicting interests, and yet has been highly, highly successful.
The pieces of the puzzle are complete, gracious, graceful. The beginning of a new era in public works projects. Imagination, recognition, and care. Glenwood Canyon provided the picture. Modern man, the frame.
It's incredible what they've done here engineering-wise. It's going to be a prototype, I think, you know, for other companies that want to do the same kind of thing all over the world. The whole citizen involvement process was just fabulous. It's a beautiful canyon.